The reason for the increased cover requirement for low-voltage cable under a residential driveway is primarily due to the potential for heavy vehicles and equipment to traverse the area. Driveways are typically subjected to heavier loads and more frequent traffic than garden areas, including vehicles, trucks, and heavy machinery. These vehicles can exert significant force on the ground surface, which can potentially damage buried cables if they are not adequately protected. Deeper cover requirement for low-voltage cable under a driveway helps to ensure that the cable is sufficiently protected from these heavier loads and potential damage. By burying the cable at a depth of 18 inches, it is less likely to be crushed or severed by the weight of vehicles or machinery passing over it. This increased cover depth adds an additional layer of protection and helps to ensure the longevity and reliability of the lighting system. In contrast, garden areas typically experience less traffic and lighter loads. While it is still important to provide adequate cover for low-voltage cable in garden areas, the potential for damage from heavy vehicles is significantly reduced. As a result, the code specifies a minimum cover depth of 6 inches for low-voltage cable in garden areas, which is sufficient to protect the cable from accidental damage during typical gardening activities. It is important to note that the code requirements for low-voltage cable cover depths are designed to provide a reasonable level of protection for the cable under typical conditions. However, it is always advisable to err on the side of caution and provide additional cover depth if possible, especially in areas where heavy vehicles or equipment may be present. When dealing with electrical installations, especially those involving low-voltage landscape lighting, adherence to the National Electrical Code, or NEC, is paramount. The NEC provides guidelines and regulations to ensure safety and prevent electrical hazards. Understanding the NEC requirements for burial depth of low-voltage cables is essential for both homeowners and electrical professionals. The NEC addresses the burial depth of low-voltage cables in specific sections, typically within Article 411 and related sections that cover low-voltage lighting systems. These sections outline the minimum depth at which cables must be buried to protect them from physical damage and other potential hazards. Firstly, the purpose of specifying different burial depths for low-voltage cables in different locations is to account for varying levels of risk. In areas such as gardens and lawns, where foot traffic and light gardening activities are common, a minimum burial depth of 6 inches is generally considered sufficient. This depth provides protection against accidental damage from shovels, gardening tools, and other light equipment. Secondly, under driveways and areas subject to vehicular traffic, the risk of physical damage to buried cables is significantly higher. Vehicles, including cars, trucks, and even heavy machinery, can exert substantial pressure on the ground, potentially crushing or damaging cables that are not buried deep enough. To mitigate this risk, the NEC requires a greater burial depth of 18 inches for low-voltage cables under driveways. This increased depth provides a buffer zone, protecting the cables from the weight and pressure of vehicles. Thirdly, factors influencing the choice of burial depth also include the type of cable being used. Direct burial cables, which are specifically designed to be buried underground without additional protection, may have different burial depth requirements compared to cables that require conduit or other forms of protection. The NEC specifies the appropriate burial depths for different types of cables based on their construction and intended use. Also, soil conditions play a role in determining the appropriate burial depth. In areas with rocky or abrasive soil, additional protection may be necessary to prevent damage to the cable. This could involve using conduit or increasing the burial depth to provide a greater buffer zone. Furthermore, the presence of other underground utilities, such as water pipes, gas lines, and communication cables, can also influence the choice of burial depth. It is essential to maintain a safe distance between different types of underground utilities to prevent potential hazards. The NEC provides guidelines for clearances between utilities to ensure safety and prevent interference. Understanding the specific requirements outlined in the NEC is crucial for ensuring the safety and reliability of low-voltage landscape lighting systems. Failure to comply with these requirements can result in electrical hazards, property damage, and even personal injury. When installing low-voltage landscape lighting, it is always advisable to consult with a qualified electrical professional who is familiar with the NEC and local codes. An experienced electrician can assess the specific site conditions and recommend the appropriate burial depths and wiring methods to ensure a safe and code-compliant installation. Consider the following points when planning and executing the installation of low-voltage landscape lighting cables. 1. Always refer to the latest edition of the NEC and local codes for the most up-to-date requirement. Electrical codes are subject to change, so it is important to stay informed of any revisions or updates. 2. Use direct burial cables that are specifically designed for underground installation. These cables are constructed with durable materials that can withstand the harsh conditions of underground environments. 3. Dig trenches to the appropriate depth, ensuring that the cables are buried at least 6 inches deep in garden areas and 18 inches deep under driveways. 4. Consider using conduit or other forms of protection in areas where the cable may be subject to physical damage. Conduit provides an additional layer of protection, safeguarding the cable from impacts, abrasion, and other potential hazards. 5. Maintain safe clearances between low-voltage cables and other underground utilities. Follow the NEC guidelines for clearances to prevent potential hazards and interference. 6. Backfill trenches with soil that is free of rocks, debris, and sharp objects. This will help to protect the cable from damage during backfilling. 7. Thoroughly inspect the installation to ensure that all connections are tight and that the cables are properly supported. A visual inspection can help to identify any potential issues before they become major problems. 8. Test the system to ensure that it is functioning properly. Use a multimeter or other testing equipment to verify that the voltage and current levels are within the specified ranges. 9. Document the installation, including the location of cables, burial depths, and wiring methods. This documentation will be helpful for future maintenance and repairs. 10. Educate homeowners about the importance of protecting buried cables and avoiding activities that could damage them. This includes avoiding digging or driving stakes into areas where cables are buried. By following these guidelines and adhering to the NEC requirements, you can ensure the safe and reliable operation of low-voltage landscape lighting systems. Remember that electrical work can be dangerous, so it is always best to consult with a qualified electrical professional if you are not comfortable performing the installation yourself. Now let's discuss some additional considerations regarding the installation of low-voltage landscape lighting cables. The type of soil in the area can influence the choice of cable and the installation method. Sandy soils tend to be well-draining and less corrosive, while clay soils can retain moisture and may be more corrosive. In areas with clay soils, it may be necessary to use cables with a more robust insulation or to install the cables in conduit to protect them from moisture and corrosion. The presence of trees and shrubs can also affect the installation of low-voltage landscape lighting cables. Tree roots can grow around and damage buried cables, so it is important to avoid planting trees or shrubs directly over buried cables. If it is necessary to run cables near trees or shrubs, consider using conduit to protect the cables from root damage. The use of landscape fabric can also affect the installation of low-voltage landscape lighting cables. Landscape fabric is a porous material that is used to suppress weeds and retain moisture in garden beds. When installing cables under landscape fabric, it is important to ensure that the fabric does not create a barrier that prevents moisture from reaching the cables. This can be achieved by using a perforated landscape fabric or by installing the cables and conduit. The type of connectors used to connect low-voltage landscape lighting cables can also affect the performance and reliability of the system. It is important to use connectors that are specifically designed for outdoor use and that are rated for the voltage and current levels of the system. The connectors should also be waterproof to prevent corrosion and electrical shorts. The use of timers and photocells can also affect the installation of low-voltage landscape lighting cables. Timers and photocells are used to automatically turn the lights on and off at predetermined times or based on ambient light levels. When installing timers and photocells, it is important to ensure that they are properly grounded and that they are connected to the cables using appropriate connectors. The location of the transformer is also an important consideration when installing low-voltage landscape lighting. The transformer is used to step down the voltage from 120 volts to 12 volts. The transformer should be located in a dry, well-ventilated area and should be protected from the elements. The transformer should also be easily accessible for maintenance and repairs. The size of the transformer is also an important consideration. The transformer must be large enough to supply the total wattage of all the lights in the system. If the transformer is too small, it will overheat and may fail. The use of LED lights can also affect the installation of low-voltage landscape lighting cables. LED lights are more energy efficient than traditional incandescent or halogen lights, so they require less power. This means that a smaller transformer can be used and that the cables can be smaller gauge. However, LED lights can also be more sensitive to voltage fluctuations, so it is important to use a transformer that provides a stable voltage. The maintenance of low-voltage landscape lighting cables is also important. A cable should be inspected periodically for damage and the connections should be checked to ensure that they are tight and corrosion-free. Any damaged cables or connectors should be replaced immediately. The area around the cables should also be kept free of weeds and debris to prevent damage to the cables. Finally, it is important to remember that electrical work can be dangerous. If you are not comfortable performing the installation or maintenance yourself, it is best to consult with a qualified electrical professional. A qualified electrician can ensure that the system is installed and maintained safely and in accordance with all applicable codes.